Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're back with the patch 6.2 H rundown, and I can't believe we're on a H patch. Wild Rift seems to be patching itself every week or every 2 weeks nowadays, and there seems to be a lot of time between the major patches, of course that being like 6.3 or even 7.0, whatever the case may be. But we've reached the H patch, right? So first G patch, first H patch, like, I don't know, we have a lot of patches, but quite a number of actual changes happening here. So mostly or not mostly, they're all basically champion changes. So first off, Swain is getting a mini rework, and this is actually pretty interesting because let's take a look at what's going on, right? So firstly, Ravenous Block, that's his passive. Each of the soul fragments used to heal for this amount, but now it is healing you for less in terms of percent health, but it has a better AP ratio, I guess. So then you have the Vision of Empire, that's the eye, the very long range one. The explosion timer is going up from 1 second to 1.35 seconds, which is a slight nerf. And the reason why he's getting these nerfs on his passive and his W is because he's basically getting a huge buff to the ulti. So Demonic Ascension used to have one charge, but now it has infinite charges, right? And then the cooldown between the two charges are 6 seconds, and the damage per second that you're getting is going down slightly, as well as the AP ratio going down slightly. So overall, he's getting nerf here, as well as a nerf here. But what this means is, if you guys don't know what this is talking about, like when Swain ults, he can tap his ult once for extra burst damage, right? If you don't tap it, it's gonna do the burst damage at the very end when your ult deactivates. Right, so now instead of doing this only once, you can do it once every 6 seconds. So in theory, if you're able to continuously ult people, which of course is kind of what Swain wants to do, you can use this 2 or maybe even 3 times. I mean, if you manage to somehow use it like 4 times, that's kind of insane because that means you have been in your ulti for a long time. But essentially, overall, it should be able to lead to more damage. The only thing is, I think it's a little bit more inconsistent, right? Because you basically sacrifice healing, hitting your W pop perhaps, as well as a lot of DPS just for the extra burst damage that of course now the damage ceiling is a lot higher because in theory you can pop the demon flare multiple times, but in practical sense you probably will pop it like once or twice only, right? Because most people are not going to be stupid enough to stand and Swain out. So personally, I feel this is more of a nerf than a buff to Swain, but of course in the correct circumstances this is a really huge buff. Right, so looking at Gwen is basically getting buffed across the board. So her damage for every snip is going up. The AP ratio is going up. Bonus damage from last snip, AP ratio is going up. Damage to jungle monsters is also going up. Now I think Gwen is a decent champion. Her jungle clear is not the best, so I guess they're helping her jungle clear here, as well as of course just helping her in lane in general, just with extra AP ratios, as well as her ulti. Base damage is going up slightly and AP ratio going up slightly as well. So overall, just a couple of nice little buffs to Gwen, who I think is already in an okay state, but small buffs to her should be alright in general. Right, so Hecarim, I actually think is one of the stronger junglers. Maybe not the top 5 anymore, but I still think definitely the top 10. Definitely one of the strongest junglers in the game. He's getting an extra 4 AD ratio, 3 base armor and 0.5 armor per level. Now, this extra 4 AD at the beginning is really huge because, as I always mentioned, base AD matters a lot for jungle clear and just for the fact that you use your Q like so many times throughout the game that extra 4 AD will stack up throughout the game to lead to a lot of extra damage, be it to jungle monsters or to champions. So I think Hecarim's getting a pretty huge buff. Now, Shyvana has been pretty, I wouldn't say weak, but has been pretty mid-tier for the longest time. She's getting a like 1 second cooldown reduction on her W, which barely matters, and she's getting a little bit of extra health on her ulti, which I think they've buffed this like 3 times already, which again I think doesn't really matter all that much. This is not going to be what changes Shyvana from a mediocre champion to a great champion. Next up we have Ryze. So Ryze gets extra 3 base armor and a little bit of extra armor per level. His Rune Prison cooldown goes down slightly, and his Realm Warp cooldown goes down slightly as well. Now, of course, Ryze did get a couple of rounds of nerfs, so now they're kind of buffing him back up a little bit, but of course not in the important areas. He's not getting any buffs to his Q, or his E, or his important base stats like armor. As a base stat, of course, does matter, especially if you're against AD matchups. It's not really the most important base stat. And Rune Prison, not the most important cooldown either. Realm Warp is kind of nice to have a little bit of a better cooldown, but again, these changes don't matter all that much. Now, same goes with Tristana, right? So Tristana gets an extra 30 base health, which does matter, of course, in those early level 1, level 2 fights, so this is a pretty nice buff. But the explosive charge is getting a little bit higher AD ratio. Now, this is what you basically max first on Tristana, right? So at max rank, you get an extra 10% AD ratio. It doesn't really help her early game. It kind of helps her mid to late game, where she basically already was pretty okay. Like, I don't really think she needs a buff to her mid and late game. I think she needs a buff to her early game, especially as I played Tristana quite a lot. Especially in this, recent time. You guys saw me make a Tristana video. We have another Tristana video coming out real soon. And yeah, I've been playing a lot of Tristana, so I don't really think her mid to late game is a big problem. I think her early game is where she needs to get buffed, which is not what she got. A little bit of base health though, but that's nice. So Ezreal, kind of a little bit similar. He's getting an extra 5% AD ratio on his Q, which is his bread and butter ability, so this will, of course, matter more for the mid and late game, because in the early game, you don't really build a lot of AD. You build like Manamune and Triforce, which don't give you a lot of AD altogether. And then you have his Essence Flux, which is the W going down by 2 seconds, or cooldown going down by 2 seconds. And I think this is actually pretty decent, because you max this last in general, and you do, of course, get a lot more use out of it when his cooldown is lower, so I do think this is a pretty nice buff for Ezreal. Now in Seraphine, they've kind of been a little bit wishy-washy on whether they want her to be weak or strong. Like, they nerf her a couple of times, then they buff her a couple of times, then nerf her a couple of times again, and it's always on the W, right? The W is kind of the crux of whether Seraphine is good as a support or not, right? Because here she gets a buff to, I believe this is her Q, 5% extra AP ratio, and then here we have another buff to the W, right? So cooldown goes down slightly, and the shield value is going down slightly, but the AP ratio is going up. So a little bit of a strange change. So this seems to be implying that Seraphine APC is kind of what they're going for instead of Seraphine support. But they've kind of always been wanting Seraphine to be a support. So I think that's a little bit strange on their part. A little bit of like mixed messaging as to what they really want Seraphine to be or do. So I'm not really sure what this is all about. It's a little bit of a confusing change, right? Also, the repeated buffs and nerfs to Seraphine, unless you're trying to transition her to becoming a mid lane champion, I'm not really sure. So Blitzcrank, his base armor is going down by 6, which is a significant amount considering there's always going to be ADC in his lane, so he's definitely going to be weaker in the earlier parts of the game. And then his overdrive, the W, the mana cost goes up, and the movement speed he gets is going down by quite a bit. So yeah, I guess a pretty significant nerf to Blitzcrank, because other than just hooking someone in, the other combo you can do is to run at someone and knock them up and then hook. So this is going to affect that combo, so Blitzcrank going to be slightly weaker. Then we have quite a number of gameplay changes to items, right? So Force of Nature gets an extra 5 magic resist, Dead Man's Plate gets extra 100 health and 20 armor. Now this is pretty huge, right? So this I think is a pretty small buff. Dead Man's Plate buff is really big. 100 extra health and 20 extra armor for the same cost. And target movement speed slow going from 50 to 75%. This is a huge buff, like the cost doesn't change, but you get 100 health and 20 armor extra for free. Like, Dead Man's Plate is getting a huge buff. And Warmock's slight buff, instead of 6 seconds, is now 5 seconds to start the Warmock's passive. Like, it's a small buff, doesn't matter all that much, but I guess just kind of nice. And then you got a couple of nerfs to crit items, right? So firstly, the soul transfer, the damage inheritance ratio for clones goes down by 5%, so definitely affects the soul transfer users, who honestly, not a lot of champions have soul transfer as a core in their build. Normally it's like one of the last few items that you have just as a nice item to have. Normally it's not really a core item for most people, so generally it's not a very big deal. But Mold Reminder gets a 200 gold nerf, so it's now costing an extra 200 gold. This kind of undoes the buff that it got initially, where it became cheaper. So now it's back to the old price of 3,300, and it's back to becoming a very expensive item, which is definitely a huge nerf to the ADC role in general, because basically every ADC builds Mold Reminder pretty much. Then you have a nerf to Navori, which is again another hit to Navori users. Instead of 12% extra damage, it's now 9% increased damage based on your crit rate. So not just did it cut 3%, but now this scales off of your crit rate. I mean, honestly, if you're building Navori, you're going to be building crit anyway, but Navori most commonly is a second item. So normally you only have 50%. So assuming this scales evenly, you will get only like 4.5% extra when you build Navori compared to 12% on initial purchase, which is a pretty big nerf, quite obviously. Now, somebody else who got a really big nerf is the Repulsor enchant. So the Repulsor enchant has been running rampant, especially in higher elo in recent times. So the cooldown is going up from 40 to 60 seconds, which is pretty huge. And the stun duration is going down by 0.5 seconds, which is also pretty huge. Now, will this stop people from building Repulsor? We'll see. Now, personally, I still have never actually built Repulsor myself, because I still think that even though it's cheap and good, like, I still think Stasis, Quicksilver, or whatnot is just generally better, but I can definitely see why Repulsor is OP. Like, just getting a 500 gold, stun every 40 seconds is pretty broken if you think about it. So, I can definitely see why people are going for it, can definitely see why it's getting nerfed. So, I think that if it's still popular, they'll probably nerf it again to a point where it becomes a specialist item again, and by which point no one will ever build it. And if it doesn't get nerfed, people will probably still build it anyways. So next up, system changes to the turrets. So the magic and armor and magic resist for a tower with plating is actually changing only in the middle two ranks, right? So it's getting slightly more tanky in the middle two ranks. Other than that, it's the same. And without the plating, it's also becoming a little bit more tanky. So inner turret gets extra resistances, and inhibitor turret gets less resistances. A little bit confusing, a couple of changes. So the outer turret basically is getting tankier, inner turret is getting tankier, but inhibitor turret is getting more squishy, which is pretty strange if you ask me. I'm not sure what they're kind of going for here with the mixed changes to turrets, but that is what they're doing, and that is basically going to be it for the patch rundown. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.